streaming. All right. Okay, guys. I understand sometimes you do have things to say to each other. You can do that.
I'm sorry, I thought you were still talking about the lights.
Huh?
I'm sorry, I thought you were still talking about the lights.
You're still talking about the lights?
I thought you were still talking about the lights.
Oh, no. I was ready to move on and talk about stuff now. All right. So we have the second exam stuff because, we missed the second exam because of the air quality issues. So that's why we have X2. And then we also have the final exam stuff for the usual final exam. So, okay. Thank you. So let me unlock the door. Thanks for opening. All right. So this is the exam, or the second exam of 2016 spring. So I'm going to download it here and then open it in OBS, not OBS, but LibreOffice. So here's LibreOffice. And this year I'm not going to use this format, so don't worry if this format looks kind of odd to you, because I had to print this on in landscape mode instead of on portrait mode, because the paper has to be wider than it is tall because of all the tracing. So you guys are probably going to see something like this in your exam. In other words, it will still be open book and open notes as long as it is on paper and it is prepared prior to the test. It's going to be okay. The only exception to that rule that is still paper-based would be psychic paper. Okay, one person got it. Okay. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, is that screenshots from your videos if we want to just print out a screenshot of
As long as it's on paper.
Okay.
So if you want to kind of take a still shot of my video, crop it and expand it or annotate it and then print it out, that's fine. So as long as it's on a piece of paper and it's not electronic, it's fine. All right. If you need additional sheets of paper, you can bring your own, okay? So don't count on me having additional sheets of paper. I suggest everybody bring just a few sheets, okay? The best, yeah, go ahead. Notebook paper would be okay, but I don't want the edge to be kind of like, ruffled up. Yeah, if it tears off clean, it's okay. If it's not clean, then it doesn't go through the scanner very well. That's the problem. So if you do use additional sheets of paper, make sure that your name is on the additional sheets of paper, just so that I don't accidentally lose track of whose additional sheets of paper those are, okay? So make sure you put your name on it. And if you ever get those, mail, they try to sell you something and they print your name on a bunch of labels, you can bring those and just kind of stick it on it. But it has your address on it, so you kind of have to kind of black out that portion first. All right. So we'll go ahead and look into the individual questions. This is question number 1. And so question number 1 does not have subroutine because exam 2 does not have subroutines. This is before we talked about subroutines. So in this case, we do have arrays, okay? So arrays are covered in exam 2 and would have in this class as well. So in this case, we have I being an index, we have S, being another variable. And then it says while I is less than bar A bar, bar A bar is an array. And then there's the loop here, if A bracket I mod 2 equals to 1, then S gets S plus A bracket I, otherwise S gets S minus A bracket I. And if I gets I plus 1, and while. So there's no way you can trace this code unless you know what is the content of array A. Okay, there are three variables in this code. I is a variable, S is a variable. Those are not the issues because you can see line 1 and 2 initialize both of those variables. The third variable is array A. But A is an array, okay, so it has several elements. So until I tell you what the array is, there's no way you can actually work on this problem. Is that making any sense? Okay. So when you look into the rest of the sheet, think, oops, yeah, I just zoom it a little bit too fast. Oh, wait, there we go. So the array A is based on your student ID. So according to the top part here, it's a little bit hard to read because I zoomed out a little bit. So according to this, trace the algorithm. Assume the precondition of array A, which has 7 elements, is based on your student ID. Okay. It doesn't let me scroll very smoothly. Okay, where A bracket 0 is the first or leftmost digit. So that's why, people would tend to have different answers to a question like this. Okay? So do you guys want me to work on this now, or do you want to work on it later? Now? Okay, all right, that makes sense. So I'm not going to give you the entire answer. I will give you guys some time to think about it, and then I'll just work on. Okay, window, new, window. Use sheet 1. All right. So I'm going to use a new sheet here as my answer. So when you bring your paper to the class, it would help to bring graph paper or bring a ruler with you, because you'll be tracing. So that means if you have the ability to draw vertical lines and potentially horizontal lines, that'll be really helpful. Now, if not, it's okay. I can try to. You can try to write in a way that that is clear what is in the column and what is in the row. Okay, so we got line number. And let me make this a little bit bigger, but not too big, because otherwise we won't be able to keep track of everything. Comments is needed here. And then we have global variables. We have I as a global variable, S as a global variable, and then A as an array has 7 elements. So it's up to you. I mean, you can use A bracket 0, bracket 1, and so on. I personally just prefer this way. So this one is up to you. Okay. And your ID is supposed to be in array A. I'm just adjusting the width so it's easier to see everything on the screen. So mine is 0, 0, 0, 6, 8, 8, 7. The other 2 variables are unknown. Okay, so the precondition is going to be like this. So are there any questions about how the precondition is supposed to look like in this particular question? Are we good so far?
If you have along the top line, if you have A0, A1, A2 all the way through, do you want the A on top with the element numbers on the bottom?
You mean, so A bracket 0, A bracket 1, A bracket 2? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, when you write it, you don't even need the brackets, underneath. I will understand, that as the indexes. Okay? So that can potentially save you a little bit of time. All right. So now we move on to line 1. Line 1 doesn't do a whole lot. Line 1 just initializes the variable I to 0. So we put a 0 here. And we can even shrink these 2 columns just a little bit. There we go. And then line 2 is going to initialize S to 0. So that is now initialized to 0 as well. And then line 3 has a condition to evaluate. So we have to answer the question, I is less than bar A bar is true because I is 0. Bar A bar is 7 because it's the actual number of elements in the array. On line 4, we have another condition to evaluate. A bracket I mod 2 equals to 1. Is that true or false? So that part depends on your actual array, okay, which depends on your student ID. Most of you probably has A bracket 0 being 1, okay, so 1 mod 2 is 1 is actually true, okay, in your case. But in my case, because I got hired relatively early, so I have a pretty low, employee ID. So in my case, 0 mod 2 is equal to 1 is false. Does everybody know what is mod or remember what mod is? Okay, modulus or the remainder after a division. So in this case, because mine is a 0, 0 mod 2 is 0, 0 equals 1 is false. So that means I have to go to the else branch. The else branch is on line 7. Line 7 says, S, which is now 0, is going to become S0 minus A bracket I. A bracket I has a value of 0, so that means, sum remains as 0. Do we have any questions at this point? No questions? All right. After line 7, where do we go? We go to line 9. Okay, so we got one more thing in the loop because the end of the conditional statement is on line 8. So that means we have to move on to line 9. Line 9 is still in the loop, but it is after the conditional statement. So be very careful when you're reading the pseudocode and not skip over a single line statement like line 9 in this case. So line 9 is not going to do much. It's just going to increment I from 0 to 1. And then we get back to the beginning, which is on line 3. Are we okay so far? This is the first iteration. So in the second iteration, same kind of question. I is less than bar A bar is true because 1 is less than 7. So the program just kind of go like this, for 7 iterations. The line 2 is A bracket I mod 2 equals to 1. It is false again because the first 3 digits of my ID are the same. So then we move on to line 7, which is the else. And once again, there's no change to S because it doesn't matter how many times you subtract 0. 0 minus 0 is always 0. Then we move on to line 9. I is now incremented to 2. Go back to line 3. And reevaluate. I is less than bar A bar. It is true. We move on to line 4. And A bracket I mod 2 equals 1 is false. Remember, the first 3 digits are the same. Then we move on to line 7. S is not changed. So this part is just because of my ID. In your case, it is very likely that the sum is going to change or variable S is going to change unless you are a very early student of this particular district. If you are an early student of this district, which basically means you started 18 years ago, then you might have a student ID about in the same range as my employee ID. I think there might be students like that, but it's very unusual that I encounter one. So here's line 9 incrementing I from 2 to 3. We go back to line 3 again, and I is less than bar A bar is true. Go back to line 4. A bracket I mod 2. Okay, so which column are we talking about? We are now done with the first 3 zeros. I is 3, so we are looking at A bracket 3, which is column H. Column H has a value of 6, which is also an even number. So when you're talking about even number, the remainder of that even number divided by 2 is going to be 0, which is not 1. So the condition doesn't change. So my ID is kind of strange because most digits are even numbers. So now we go to line 7 again, and this time we are subtracting 6 from 0. So it is no longer 0 because I am subtracting something from variable S this time. Line 9, we increment I from 3 to 4. Go back to line 3. I is less than bar A bar is true. Go back to line 4. A bracket I, this time it is the 8. Mod 2 equals 1 is false. So we go to line 7. And now we have minus 6, which is S minus 8. So that will make it negative 14. Go to line 9, increment I again from 4 to 5. Go back to line 3. I is less than bar A bar is true. Go to line 4. A bracket I mod 2 equals to 1 is false because the because now we're at the second last digit, which is 8. And if you want to keep track of that, we can do this trick. So this way I can use the top portion to keep track of not only the column heading, but also the array. And then the bottom part is used for the trace. So after line 4, we go to line 7. So now we subtract 8 from negative 14, which makes it negative 22. We go to line 9. We increment I to 6. Go back to line 3. I is less than bar A bar is true. Go to line 4. And this is the only time in this entire execution where A bracket I, which is A bracket 6, which is also column K, which has a value of 7. This time, A bracket I mod 2 equals to 1 is actually true. It's the only time. And then we go to line 5, where we add 7 to 22. Adding 7 to 22 makes it negative 15. And we get to line 9. We add 1 to I. I goes from 6 to 7. We go back to line 3. I is less than bar A bar is now false. And we get out. So now we get to a line called post, which signifies that we are done with the trace. So do we have any questions about this trace? It's a little tedious. It's doing the same thing 7 times, basically. Any questions about this? Now, what if you, like me, okay? Sometimes when you do arithmetic, it is off, okay, and you don't have a calculator to help you. Well, you might get like a very minor amount of points deducted because of that, okay, but it's not going to be major. On the other hand, if someone tells me, oh, we get to line 9, I gets a value of 7, done, post. That will get some more. That will get more points deducted because it's a concept issue. Okay, going back to line 3 first, and then you get out of the loop is very crucial. We okay so far with that? So I'm just giving you some idea of how I grade something like this. Are there any questions about this? Nope. Okay. Then we can move on to the next question. So this is the second question. The second question, this one does have subroutine. So for whatever reason, maybe I taught a little bit faster that semester. So even in the second exam, there were subroutines. So we can take a look at this one. So this is subroutine XYZ, doesn't do much, has 2 parameters, X and Y. It returns the value, the sum of X and Y. And then in the subroutine main, we say A gets A bracket 0 plus invoke XYZ using A bracket 1 to specify X, the negative version of A bracket 2 to specify Y, A bracket 3 to specify negative A bracket 3 to specify X, and then the non-negative version of A bracket 4 to specify Y, and then we add up the 2 return values of the invoke. Okay, same thing. If you read the first part here, I'm assuming that you would use your student ID to initialize the array with 7 elements. Okay, so now the question is, well, what is the actual outcome of this algorithm? So let's take a look. So here we have line number, and we have, so this is the precondition. We do have, nope, we don't have conditions here, so we don't have comments. There's no need for that. Array A is the only, question?
So the negative of A bracket, whatever, would just be the negative of the value?
Yeah, it's just a negation, arithmetic negation.
Okay.
Yep. So we do have a global variable, which is A. So A, once again, has 7 elements. But since we're only going to use up to A bracket 4, so we'll just track up to A bracket 4, just so that I don't use up too much space. But in your trace, if this is your question, you have to write down all 7 digits. It's because, the screen doesn't have as much space as on a piece of paper. All right. So I'm going to put, the precondition. I'm going to move the pre down here. So the precondition is the leftmost 5 digits of my ID. So 0, 0, oops, 0, 0, 0, 6, 8. Okay. And now, yeah?
Can I recommend using another one? Or just do like a random subset of numbers?
Sure, yeah, sure. So we can do it 1, 7, 5, 6, 8. Okay, okay,
Get a little variance and trace.
okay, sure, makes sense. All right, so now we go to line 9, which is the first line outside of the definition of a subroutine. Okay, the line number column is going to get pretty ugly, okay, because when we return back to, there'll be a few times we have to get back to line 7. So we have to either return line number or return info. So if you want to use return info in this case, that's fine. You'll just say when we get back we have to go to post. Same thing with line number. And the reason we can choose is because a main does not return a value. And so now we can move on. There are no parameters to set up. Main has no parameters. It also has no local variables. So there's absolutely nothing to set up other than the return info or the return line number. Now we get into the main subroutine on line 7. So on line 7, we look at line 7 in the original code. It looks pretty ugly, okay? So what you need to do is to think about, okay, what can I do at this point? Line 7 looks exactly the way it is on the projector right now. So what can I do? I can't do the addition. I don't know the values to add. I cannot do the assignment because I don't know what is the right-hand side, what is the value of the right-hand side. But I can invoke XYZ, okay, because the array is already initialized. So I know how to invoke XYZ. So in that case, you can choose which one to invoke first. In most programming languages, there's no strict requirement that this has to be evaluated from left to right. So if you say, I want to evaluate the second one first, hey, that's fine. So which one do you want me to evaluate first? Sorry?
First.
Left. Okay. So we'll use the left-hand side one, okay? This is where, when you're hand copying, it's going to be a little bit more of a trouble because you have to kind of copy and paste the entire thing, but by hand. But in my case, I can just copy and paste it. So now we have return info. Column H being return info is not optional. It is mandatory. And that has to do with XYZ as a subroutine returns a value. And that value is utilized when we get back. So in this particular return info, you have to indicate when the subroutine is done, we have to get back to line 7. And not only that, when we get back to line 7, the left-hand side invocation will be done, and the whole thing is replaced by a single question mark indicating that is the return value of that invocation. So are we okay so far with this? Okay. Just so that I don't use up too many columns or too much space, width-wise, I'm just going to use a wraparound. So we'll go to Format, Text, and Wrap Text. So it does look a little bit ugly, but when you click on it, you can see in the formula bar what it should be. Okay, but since we're calling XYZ, it does have parameters. So it has two parameters. In this case, it has parameter X and parameter Y. And when you look at the left invocation, it is using a bracket 1 to specify X, and then negative a bracket 2 to specify Y. So now we go back here and we say, what is a bracket 1? It is a 7. So you specify a 7 here. And then we look at a bracket 2. It has a value of 5. But remember, this one is negated. So that means it is a negative 5. Are we okay so far with how we set up the parameters X and Y?
So, question.
Yes.
The next half of line 7 there where it says plus invoke XYZ minus a bracket 3 or say just a dash?
Where?
On line 8 at the end in the second invocation.
In the second invocation.
Is that XYZ minus a bracket 3 or just a dash?
This is a negative.
Negative.
So whatever the value is, it'll just
Negative goes in X.
But we are not doing that. We are handling the left one.
Right, but just to write it down, right?
Yeah, the document is on a canvas already, but if you want to kind of have your own copy so you can annotate now, it'll be helpful.
So if a guy had to ask a question like that during the exam, you'd probably answer that, right? That's probably innocuous enough.
I can clarify the question. In other words, if the question is not clear or if you cannot read it clearly, I can answer that question. But I cannot answer questions like, what does mod do? That I cannot answer. But if you want to say, is that a hyphen or a minus, I can help clarify that. Is that okay? All right. Can I switch back to the trace? Okay. All right, so switching back to the trace, now we are ready to go into the subroutine. Now, I just want to emphasize one more thing. With columns I and j, or with the two pass-by value parameters, you don't want to put a bracket 1 here. You don't want to write down negative a bracket 2 here. It has to be the fully resolved numerical value and not just say, oh, we use a bracket 1 to specify x and we use negative a bracket 2 to specify y. I cannot accept that as a correct answer. It has to be a numerical value. Is that okay? Does everybody understand what I meant? Okay, let me illustrate what I would not accept as a correct answer, at least for this part.
Can we see
This would not be good.
Can we see the original line of code first?
The original line of code.
Line 7 on the code.
And it is not a reference of another column either. Okay, so I don't want to, if I see AX is a reference of column C, I would not take that as a correct answer, at least for that part of the answer. Yep.
We wouldn't use by reference unless we were actually using by ref.
Yeah, there's no by ref.
That is correct. And that's why, it states, here on lines 2 and 3 that X and Y are definitely passed by value. Okay. Are we good so far? Okay. All right. So now we get into the subroutine, XYZ. XYZ is a pretty simplistic subroutine. Line 4 is the first line that actually does something. It returns the sum of X and Y. So you look up X, it is 7. You look up Y, it is -5. The sum of those two is going to be 2. So the return statement of line 4 is returning a value of 2. What do we do when we execute a return statement? Yep. So we copy and paste the return info cell and then change the only question mark to the value that the subroutine or the return statement is returning. In this case, it is a constant of 2. Is that okay? Now, if you are tracing something and then you encounter a line or a return info cell that has more than one question mark, something is not right. Okay? If you are executing a return statement and then the return info cell does not have a single question mark, something is not right. Okay? So those things are telling you that you're missing something. Okay? Either you're forgetting to turn the invocation into a question mark when you create the return info cell, or you're reusing something that is already specified. But something is not right, okay? If you must have one and only one question mark to fill in when you execute a return statement. Is that okay? All right, so I'm telling you all these little things so that you can kind of use that to double check your answer and go like, is everything still okay, okay? So this is the execution of line 4, which is a single return statement. And then on line 5, we are done with the invocation of XYZ. So we have the two things to do. This is the part where it is kind of difficult on the piece of paper because you have to kind of copy and paste this whole thing. Now, if you don't want to copy and paste and you go like, okay, I'm running out of time, I don't want to waste my time to copy and paste, you can draw an arrow, okay? Draw an arrow from here and then just move it down here, and I would take that as a correct answer. Yep.
Unrelated question to
Yep.
this, but speaking of by ref in a subroutine, how we usually do it on trace, we would be referring to an actual column number or like a column letter. How are we going to do that?
So when you draw your cells, have column numbers on top or column specification. Sorry?
Doesn't matter if it's numbers or letters.
Letters would be better, because it's more consistent with an actual spreadsheet, which is what we're used to. So that was a good question. Yep. All right. So if I want to be a little bit more clear, and I think we got space to do it. Yep, we do. Okay. So I'm going to make column A just a little bit wider, but I will also turn on. There we go. And we'll also turn on text wrapping, just so that we don't use up too much width for this column. So now we go back to line 7. Oh, forgot to do one thing. I forgot to deallocate all the columns for the invocation of XYZ. So we have to indicate this. So on a piece of paper, you still have to do the same thing. Now, if you say, I'm running out of time, I don't want to write down return info, XY, and then cross them out, you can just cross out. Okay, so I would take that as an answer, as indicating that these columns are deallocated. So that makes it a little bit faster when you're doing it on a piece of paper. So is that okay? Does everybody understand what I mean when I said you can just kind of like cross out the whole thing without writing the words first? But I need some kind of to tell me that you understand that you have to deallocate those columns. Okay, strike through. So now we are back here. We're back on line 7. But line 7 doesn't look like what it was because we have already resolved one invocation of XYZ to a constant of 2. But I still cannot perform the addition. I can perform the addition of this part here, but I'm not going to do that because the second addition cannot be done without invoking XYZ again. So this is the time to invoke XYZ again, which means I'm going to have to reallocate columns H, I, and J for that purpose. So I'm going to reallocate those columns for exactly the same thing. And that's only because I'm calling XYZ twice on this line. It is entirely possible that the second invocation is to a different subroutine, so I might need more or less or fewer columns. Okay, it is just so happens that in this case, both of them are calling XYZ. Return info is going to be, we have to go back to line 7, A bracket, so we have to specify A bracket 0 gets A bracket 0 plus 2, which is resolved earlier, and then plus a question mark, because the second question mark is replacing the invocation, the second invocation here. And what happened to this one? Why is it, the cell doesn't look right. Something happened to it. There we go. Did I touch something? Okay. Okay, so what goes into X? We are using negative A bracket 3 to specify parameter X. A bracket 3 has a value of 6, so negative 6 goes to parameter X. So negative 6 goes here. And what about Y? Y is just 8 non-negated. There we go. And then we go to line 4 in the subroutine. And on line 4 of the subroutine, we just add up the two values and return it. So we have negative 6 plus 8, which is also 2. And it's coincidental because I try to use different numbers. But it's also returning a value of 2 this time, which means I just copy and paste the return info cell, change the question mark, and it should be the only question mark in the entire return info cell, change that to 2. But I'm not going to say, oh, 2 plus 2 is 4. I can just replace that with 4. Nope, we don't do a single thing about what the question mark is used. Okay, we just replace it. So now we continue execution to line 5. Line 5 has got two things to do. One is to tell me where do I need to go back to next. It will be line 7, and then we can deallocate the 3 columns used by the invocation of XYZ. When this is done, we continue execution on line 7. This time, we don't have to invoke anything because we know what is A bracket 0. Well, that's column B. It has a value of 1. We know what is 2. We know what is 2. So 1 plus 2 is 5, and a bracket 0, which is column B, is now replaced with a value of 5. All right, update that. Now we are done with the only statement in main. So now we move on to line 8. Line 8 says, okay, this is the end of a subroutine. Where should I go? So we say, okay, look up the return info cell, the rightmost return info cell. It says go to post. All right, cool. So once I use up column G, I have to remember to deallocate it. So I just go here. And once again, in your case, you just need you need a dash, which is the width of the column that you're deallocating, to indicate that you are deallocating that column. But since in my case I can do this, I'm just going to do it. Now we continue execution at post, which means we're done. Do we have any questions about this particular trace or the standards, what I expect you to do in this?
So on line 14?
On line 14,
Wrong to go a bracket 0 gets 0 and then continue.
Say that one more time.
So on line 14.
Yep.
In
On row 14 of the trace.
column H, on row 14 in column H, is it wrong to put a bracket 0 gets whatever value you had, add all those together?
Okay. Column H should have nothing to do with this line. Because column H was deallocated when we were on line 5. So those columns are not in use anymore.
So once we get to the assignment statement, we don't have to do the addition, we just do it and then assign it right there?
You have to execute line 7 the way it is on row 14. Question? No? Okay. Are there any questions about this? All right. I'm just looking at the clock, making sure that I got enough time to cover the other test. Okay, this is sheet number 3, and this is the question of number 3. This is recursive. It's a recursive algorithm. And once again, we are initializing the array with your student ID. So it's kind of a mixture because in the subroutine, it refers to A as a global variable, but it also refers to the parameters I and X. So do we want to do this one? Yep. Okay, cool. All right, so here is the next trace. So we got line number. Definitely need comments because we do have two conditions to evaluate. And then we have the global variable A. And once again we have a bracket 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just making these a little bit narrower. And then we can think of some random values to use in this case. Okay, that one cannot be, so we'll just choose one digit. And that's it. I think that's the only global variable that we need in this case. The first line outside of the definition of a subroutine is line 15. Line 15 says we're invoking XYZ. So we'll take a look at what we are using to pass into what the parameters are. So we are passing 6 to I, which is passed by value. We're using Y. Oh, okay, so we have another global variable Y, so we'll add that as a column. And then we use Y to specify X. So we have one more column in the trace for global variable Y. So Y needs its own column, and as a precondition, it should be a 0. So unless the question text specifically say how to initialize a global variable, it should always start with question marks. So Y is starting with question mark. So on line 15, when we invoke the subroutine.
Super question here.
Yep, go ahead.
In column J, is it wrong to put return info and post and then start the X and Y after that in KML?
You kind of need to put all the allocations in one particular area, and then when you invoke a subroutine, then that portion is that portion. So you cannot mix columns for global variables and return info and parameters and stuff like that. All the global variables should be allocated before return line number. Sure.
So those aren't global variables, though. Those are local variables,
Which one?
X and Y.
Y has to be a global
Oh, it is. Yeah.
because this is outside of the context of a subroutine, and local variables can only live within the definition of a subroutine. So any variable referred from outside of the definition of a subroutine has to be a global.
And you know that it's global because even though it's listed in that line of code, it's not mentioned anywhere else in the
Even if it is mentioned, I mean, just because you have a global variable y,
it's not mentioned inside any of the subroutines.
it doesn't matter. It is used outside of the definition of a subroutine. That automatically makes it a global variable. Now, if inside a subroutine, you have a name that you cannot explain otherwise. It is not a by val parameter, it is not a by ref parameter, and it is not a local, then it is also a global variable. So A in this case falls into that category. All right, so we'll start up. This time we can use return info or return line number. Either one is fine. But for the sake of easier to trace so that you don't have to write a lot of stuff, I would use return line number. The subroutine XYZ does not return a value, so there's no need to use return info. Using return info means you have to say the line number where it's supposed to go back to, and everything else on that line. So if you want a shorthand, then you use just return line number. So I would use return line number in this case, just so that I don't have to deal with that. So post, okay. And then we have to specify all the extra stuff that comes with the invocation of XYZ. We got by val parameter I, by ref parameter X, and there are no local variables. So I is 6, and then X is a reference to which column? What did I use to specify parameter X? Column J. Yep, column J is the answer. There we go. So do we have any questions about how these three columns are set up? Sound good? Okay. Moving into the subroutine, starting on line 4. So line 4 is asking, oops, I've been using the wrong column. Excuse me. They belong. Okay. Press the wrong key. All right, so from line 15 we go to line 4, and then we evaluate the condition. I equals to 0 is false. Okay, so we go to the else case. So which is asking another question, right? Because it's saying else if. So on line 6 we have to indicate I is greater than 0 is true. 6 is greater than 0. So that is true. So now we go to line 7. Line 7 says, let's go ahead and invoke XYZ again. So that means, okay, I have to check whether this screen has more space or not. We actually don't have space on this screen. So so I will take a note of what is being passed here, and then we'll construct those columns. It's passing I minus 3 to I. So what I am I talking about when I say I minus 3? Which column is that I referring to? L. Column L, okay? Column L has a value of 6. 6 minus 3 is 3. So the new column that is going to be labeled I starts with a value of 3, okay? What about X? I'm using X to specify X. So the new X, is it going to be a reference to column J, or is it just going to be reference to column J? Just a single reference, okay? Because the idea is I just need to know which column it is referring to. I don't need it to be a reference of a reference, okay? Okay, so now that we know that, we'll go set up those columns. So I'm moving the screen to go cover the code, just so that you can see how those columns are set up. Return line number is going to be whatever is after that, which is line 8. And then we have parameter I passed by value, has a value of 3. And then we have parameter x, which is passed by reference. But it is the same thing as the other x, which is just a reference to column J. Okay, so we shrink the columns a little bit. Okay, and I think I need to, okay, where's the bar? Yep, right here. So this allows me to scroll horizontally, independently. So that lets me do, okay, this side has to move again. Okay. So this gives me the ability to continue to show the source code and trace at the same time. All right, so where do we go now? We are done setting up the new columns for a new invocation. Where do we go? This is recursion. It is calling the same subroutine. So is there any special consideration when a subroutine is calling itself? The answer is no. Okay, so don't overthink. Just treat it as any subroutine invocation. We start from the beginning of the subroutine, which is on line 4. So line 4 is asking the same question. Does I equal to 0? Nope. Go to line 5. Oh, not line 5. Line 6. And line 6 asks, is I greater than 0? Yes. Then we go to line 7 again. So we are calling XYZ again. So this time when we call XYZ, the return line number is kind of the same thing. When we come back, we have to go to line 8. And then we specify what goes to I. What goes to I this time? Column 0, because 3 minus 3 is 0. The I minus 3, this part here, is referring to which column? Column O, which has a value of 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. So the 0 goes to the new column because we are constructing the new column at this point. And then X is still the same thing. It's a reference to column J. All right, so we resize the columns just a little bit. Okay, it just all shows up on the screen. That's nice. Then we go back to line 4. I equals to 0 is true. So what we do is we just say X gets a value of 0. Oh, okay. So what if this is line 5. So on line 5, if I put a value here, that would be considered incorrect, okay? Because when a parameter is passed by reference and you have an assignment statement to update the parameter itself does not get changed because it is only a reference. It's telling you, oh, go change that column. Don't change me, change that column. So when it is referring to column J, it is column J that needs to be updated. So I have to scroll a little bit because I don't have enough screen space to display everything at the same time. So column J is now updated to a value of 0. It was unknown before, now it is 0. That's what line 5 is going to do. Then we go to, where do we go after line 5? We go to the end if corresponding to line 4, which is line 13. And there's nothing to do after that, so we go to line 14. So line 13 we don't trace line 13. If you trace line 13, I'm not going to say it's wrong, okay? It's just that there's nothing to do on line 13. So we get all the way to line 14. Line 14 is the end of a subroutine. So we got a few things to do. We go to the rightmost return line number, and then we just say, we have to go back to line 8. And then we have no use of these 3 columns anymore. So on line 14, you have to indicate that these columns are now deallocated. Once again, in your test, when you run out of time, you just put a horizontal line through those columns, and I will understand that you're deallocating. Now we're back to line 8. What is line 8 going to do? Well, we have a comparison. So it is comparing A bracket X with A bracket I. What am I comparing? What is X? X is a reference to column J, and that is 0. And what is I? I is 3. Oh, very good, because I is a pass by value parameter. And we are columns Q, R, and S are now deallocated, so they're not in the picture anymore. So we are now comparing A bracket 0 against A bracket 3. So according to the way we initialize, okay, I just moved the whole thing, and this side moved also. So when you look at A bracket 0, it has a value of 1, and then A bracket 3 has a value of 3. So 1 is greater than 3 is false. Okay. So we go back to this cell, and then we say this is false. So if the condition of line 8 is false, where do we go? We go to end if on line 10, and then where do we go? And then end if on line 13, but we don't track end ifs in a trace. If you want to kind of make it more explicit so that you can make it clear that, okay, we're hitting the end of this conditional statement, and then because that's the end of a branch, then we hit the other end, that's fine. Okay, so if you write down line 13 and line 10 in your trace, I'm not going to take points off. It's okay. But the bottom line is, to me, I just need to know that you know from line 8, yes, could have been worse, yes.
That is not that bad.
All right. So now we get to line 14, and line 14 is the end of the subroutine. We got two things to do. We look up the rightmost return line number, line 8. Okay, so we put 8 here. And then we deallocate these columns. So I'll just repeat these things here. Okay, so since you came in a little bit late, you might want to re-watch the video because there might be some useful stuff from the beginning. Okay, he's not listening to me. So he has to listen to that part again too. Yes, because there might be some useful stuff that you have missed. All right, so we are back to line 8 again. But when we get back to line 8, columns N, O, and P are no longer used in this case. So we are now pretty much back to columns K, L, and M as far as the context is concerned. So when we get back to line 8 and we ask, is A bracket X greater than A bracket I, we are really comparing A bracket 0 because X, which refers to column J, is still a 0. And we're comparing that to A bracket I, which is A bracket 6. So depending on how I initialize that, 1 is greater than 2 is false. Okay, so we can say it's the same thing. And then we go to line 14, okay, because there's nothing to do. And then on line 14, we look up the return info cell, which is now saying post. So we're pretty close to being done. And then we deallocate the columns. And we have to line up that right there. And now we get back to post, which means there's nothing else to do. We are done. So are we good so far with this? All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Yeah, I thought this would be a good time for a break. So we come back at 7:05 p.m. It's warmer inside, not by a whole lot, huh?
I was gonna say, wow, Hatski tastes just like Costco.
Kirkland, Techland. Ah, that feels good. Okay, this is the last one. Oh, I like this one. It's binary search,
Oh,
recursive. Okay. I'm just looking to see how much space I have, if I need to display the entire thing. So yeah, that's actually not bad. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to restart. OBS should be still running. I'm just going to double check. Yep, still running. And that's good. It's also good that I turn off the mic so none of the conversation outside got recorded.
I know what to steal your secret for real.
No, this is not about me. It's about other people outside talking. So we got line number, we got comments for sure. And this time, assume the precondition is based on your student ID, but it has to be sorted this time.
So that means split the elements and rearrange your student ID potentially?
That is interesting. It's not binary search. It's not binary search. So it's okay. It just looks like binary search, but it's not. Okay, but I do want to find out what that line is saying. Okay, so you just kind of put in your student ID like the other ones. Okay, it's not binary search, so I take it back. It just looked like it. Okay, so we got A bracket 0, 1, 2.
But if you were to ask it to be binary search, we'd have to sort it and just arrange our student ID from least to greatest, right?
Well, binary search only works when it is on a sorted array, but you can run binary search on a non-sorted array. It just doesn't get a job done right, which means even. You guys okay?
Oh, no, it's all good.
Oh, is your hood, interfering?
Yeah, I was like slapping him up.
You can put stuff in his hood.
Yeah,
Then I gotta get it later.
I like this stuff.
But he won't know who put it there,
Yeah, like old Christmas here.
like used gum. Well, that's what I usually get, when I do in my college years. Is under the table. It's always like a stack of gums that people have, chewed up and go like, yeah. You don't want to look, okay? So don't look, you won't be troubled. You might be that person who sat at my desk, right before my class. All right, so we got line number, we got comments, we got the array, and we'll try a different ID this time. So maybe 1, 6, 2, 5, 8, 9, 2. There we go. All right, so this is my precondition, and we'll double check to make sure that we do not need anything else. So A is the only global variable, B is the name of a parameter, E is the name of a parameter, so they're fine. Inside the subroutine, we have B, E, and M already defined, and then we have references to only A that is not explained. So I think we are good here. Is F a globe X in the subroutine? Where is X?
In line 18.
On line 18?
X gets the index.
Oh, X is a global because it has to get the value, so that's it. Global here, so this is X, starts with an unknown value. All right, so we are ready to go. And yeah, I'm pretty sure we have to split the screen this time, so I'm gonna split it here. And the first line outside of the definition of a subroutine is line 18, so we start with line 18. And line 18 starts right off with a subroutine call. And that's because I don't know what to use to update X until the invocation is done and give me a return value. So that's why we have a subroutine call or invocation, and we don't have a choice this time. We cannot use a return line number. We have to use a return info. So the rule is, if you're returning to the next line, you can use a return line number because that's kind of like a shorthand. On the other hand, if you have to get back to the same line because there's some unfinished business on that line, then you have to use a return info cell, because now you have to spell out exactly what is on that line and what else you have to do when you get back. And in this case, I'm just going to go over like this, just so that we can specify that rather long line. So this is X, and actually it's not very long. It's just a single question mark here, because the entire invocation is replaced by a single question mark. And if you double check on line 8, that's all it is. The right-hand side is a single invocation. All right, so the return info cell does not take up nearly as much space as I thought it would, but it also has some additional columns. It has got B, it has got E, it has got M. M is a local variable, starts with an unknown value. And then we have parameter B and parameter E. Parameter B starts with 0, and parameter E starts with bar A bar -1, which is 6 in this case, because the array A has 7 elements. So that becomes our first invocation. So we get into the subroutine starting on the first line, which is line 5. And then we ask the question, is B less than E? The answer is yes. Okay, it is true. Then we go to line 6. Line 6 has an assignment statement. So it looks like binary search, because binary search also has B plus E, the whole thing divided by 2, and then take the floor of that. So we have kind of the same thing. So 6 plus 0 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. The floor of 3 is just 3. So M is updated to 3. Yep.
Rule 5 needs to write line 18 because we should have to write
Oh, right. Yes, we have to remember to write down line 18 and what is left on line 18 to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Forgot about that. There we go. All right, so line 6 is done. Then we move on to line 7. Line 7 asks A bracket M mod 2 equals to 0 is, well, what do you think? What is M? M is 3. So now we have to look up what is A bracket 3. A bracket 3 is right in the middle. So A bracket 3 has a value of 5. 5 mod 2 is 1. 1 equals to 0 is false. Okay. So it is false. And I'm going to make this column wrap around. So we go to, uh-oh, what did I do? Press the wrong key. Okay. Hold on a second. Let me go to text, turn on wrap text. Yes, there was a question?
No, but I'll look it up later.
Oh, okay. So line 7 has a condition that is false. Then where do we go? We're not going to go to line 8. We're going to go to line 10.
Is there more of line 7?
Oh, right. Yeah, this is line 5, line 7. So we should go to line 10.
There's a second set of parentheses there on line 7.
Aha. Okay, very good. So that's very observant, but we don't care. Because it is short-circuited. So this is the other thing that is kind of tricky, okay? So you definitely need to pay attention here, because you have to remember that conditions are evaluated as lazily as possible in C and C++. So that means if the left-hand side of a conjunction is false, you don't bother to evaluate the right-hand side. And the only way that you can indicate that is to only tell me that A bracket M mod 2 equals to 0 is false. And don't even mention the right-hand side of the conjunction. Okay?
If we have an or instead of and, we should do it.
If it is an or, then if the left-hand side is true, then you just conclude. But if the left-hand side is false in the case of an or, then you evaluate the right-hand side as well. So your answer has to indicate that you understand short-circuited evaluation. So are we good so far? Does everybody understand what is short-circuited evaluation? You guys want me to explain that? Or no? Okay. Okay. So are you good now with what is short-circuited evaluation? Okay.
So if the first one's true, then you have to, so you don't have to look at the second one, if the first one's true.
In the case of a conjunction, if the...
it's false, never mind.
Okay. All right. All right, so we move on to line 10 in this case because the condition itself is false. So if the condition of line 7 is false, we go to the else, which is on line 10. So line 10 is still recursive, but we have to find out how we pass the parameters. So it's recursive, it's a return, but it also has a minus a bracket m after that. So when we write down the return info here, we have to say we are returning to line 10 again. When it does return, we have the return statement to execute. The first part is replaced by a question mark because that is actually our invocation. But the second part, which is minus a bracket m, I think, still needs to occur. So this part here still needs to occur before we return. So the return info cell this time is a little bit more complicated because it's not really just a single question mark. The question mark is inside an expression. We have a subtraction to evaluate. And then we have to specify what goes into the two parameters, b, e, and then there's a local variable m. So we'll deal with m first. It's just a single question mark. And then we read the source code to find out what do we specify for b. Is m plus 1? What is m again? M is 3, 3 plus 1 is 4. And then I think E is just passed to E in this case, right here. So E is 6. So we're passing the 6 along. And that becomes the context of the next invocation. Are we okay so far? How the columns are set up? Okay. So when we invoke the subroutine, we always start from the beginning. So that would be line 5. Line 5 is asking, is B less than E? Yes. Then we go to line 6. We compute M. So in this case, 4 plus 6 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And the floor of 5 is 5. So M is just going to be updated to 5. And then on line 7, we ask those questions. A bracket M mod 2 equals to 0 is, well, what do you think? Well, I can't see it yet. Okay, that's 9. So A bracket M refers to A bracket 5, which has a value of 9. 9 mod 2 is 1. 1 equals to 0 is false. Okay. So that means we have to go to line 10 again. And line 10 is another recursive call. And it's set up the same way as last time. So not this one. Return info. Go back to line 10. Return question mark minus a bracket m. And then we have b, which is m plus 1. So that will make it 6. And then we have e, which is the same as the other e, which is also 6. And then we have m, which is a local variable, which starts with an unknown value. So that's how we set up the new columns. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. And then we go back to the first line of the subroutine, which is line 5. B is less than E is false. Very good. Okay, so this is not less than or equal to. Binary search is less than or equal to. This is not binary search. So it's just asking less than. So if the condition of line 5 is false, where do we go? Do we go to line 10? No, because that is not the correct else. Which else should we go to? Line 12. Very good. So we go to line 12, and line 12 has its own question to ask. Does B equal to E? Yep. Okay. Well, then we go execute line 13. Line 13 says, let's go ahead and return A bracket B. B is 6, and A bracket 6 has a value of 2. So we are returning a value of 2. So that means we just go to the return info cell, copy and paste it, change the question mark to a 2, and we're done. Also, remember, I think I mentioned this already. In the test, instead of copying and pasting and then changing the question mark, you can on this cell point to the question mark and then just cross out the question mark and replace it with a value. So I just need to be visually be able to see that you know on which row you are changing the question mark to what value. So as long as that is clear to me, you don't have to copy and paste. Because copying and pasting is a luxury that I have when I have a spreadsheet, but when you're doing everything on paper, I understand that it takes time to do it. So as long as you can indicate the same thing, okay, I will take it as a correct answer. Is that okay? All right. All right, so I'm done with line 13. But line 13 is a return, and then line 10 is also a return. Isn't that kind of confusing? No? Because we are executing line 13, which updates a return info cell. It just so happens that the return info cell is also describing a return statement. So those two returns have nothing to do with each other. Okay? Executing line 13 does not affect how we execute a return statement. So after line 13, where do we go? Line 17, because here we get out of the outer conditional statement, so we now arrive on line 17. So line 17 has got two things to do. It has to know what is the next line to execute. So once again, you can just draw an arrow to say that this is the new line 10 and we're going to execute it. And then we have to deallocate the 4 columns of the last invocation. So we get rid of these. Strike through. So now we are getting back to line 10. But remember, your context is no longer columns V to Y. You have to roll your columns back a little bit. So now our context is column R to column U. So even though we are getting back to line 10, okay, what is M in this case? M is now 5, not 6 anymore. Okay, that M belonged to an invocation that is now gone. We are done with that invocation. So when we look at line 10, we ask, can we do it now? Yes, there are no further invocations to perform. We can actually execute this return statement. We know what is 2. We also know what is M. M is 5. And because we know what M is, we also know what is A bracket M. A bracket M is A bracket 5, which has a value of 9. Are we good? Okay. 2 minus 9 is negative 7. So the actual return value is negative 7. We are returning a value of negative 7. So we execute a return statement, and all it takes is to copy and paste the return info cell, the rightmost return info cell, and change the question mark to the value that we are returning, which in this case is negative 7. Okay? So this one is even more confusing because the statement we're executing is on line 10, but then the return info cell is also describing a line 10. So don't let that bother you, okay? Whatever is in the return info cell, change that question mark to whatever value you're returning, and that's all you have to do. Now we're done with line 10. We move on to where? We No, 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 not yet. You cannot go from line 10 to line 10. You have to go through the end of a subroutine first. So the end of a subroutine is on line 17, okay? So we get to line 17. Line 17 is saying, okay, let's make a note of where we need to go after this. There we go. And then we can deallocate the columns. Oops. There we go. Are we good so far? Yes? Okay. So now we roll our columns back, and when we execute this line 10, we are using column N to column O. So now we are asking, which M are we talking about? M is column Q, which has a value of 3. So we look up the array, A bracket 3 has a value of 5. So we are asking what is -7 minus 5? -12. So now we are returning a value of -12, which means, well, once again, we look up the rightmost return info cell. This time it's column N. Copy and paste it. Change the question mark to the value that we're returning, which is 12. And that's it, okay? We do not update X at this time. We just say, well, the question mark is -12. So now we are done with executing line 10, and then we go to line 17. Same stuff, except this time when we get back, we're getting back to line 18. And now we have no use of these 4 columns anymore. So we deallocate the columns. And then we continue execution on line 18. Line 18 is outside of the subroutine definition. So this X is referring to the global variable X, which I think is column J. Yep. So column J, or global variable X, is now finally updated to a value of -12. And then we get to post, and then we're all done. So are we okay so far with this particular trace? Hmm? Oh, right, we have to deallocate too. So after, wait, no, there's nothing to deallocate. We're done. Global variables do not get deallocated. Huh? Row 24. Row 24 has nothing to deallocate. It has nothing to deallocate because, I skipped a whole bunch of columns. That's why. I skipped a bunch of columns. That's why. Okay, so I can cheat here just by deleting the columns. Since I don't have anything that's passed by reference, it's okay. I'll have one more column to deallocate right there. So sorry about the confusion. I skipped 3 columns, when I allocated the so-called leftmost available column. Are we good so far with this trace? Okay. Any questions about the concept involved, like what is invoking, what is a by value parameter, by reference parameter, what is an array, that sort of stuff? No questions? Okay. I believe this is the last question of the exam 2 of that year, because sheet 6 is the stuff that we did today. So are we good so far? All right. So what I'll do is I'm going to save this file using a new name, save as, exam 2 answered. And then I'll re-upload it back to Moodle. So this way you guys have a copy of the spreadsheet.
I think we had another question about the precondition and post something.
I thought there was one question like that too.
If I checked at home,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, was another question about finding post precondition.
Okay, I'll check that. Just give me a second to upload this first.
Maybe it was the last question.
So there's one more. Okay, let me upload this. I vaguely remember there's one. This is Is that the right folder?
Yeah, we can just get that in here. I mean, I know that there's something before and after. You know that there's something before and after. I think we all understand there's something before and after.
Do you really know that?
If I were a minister, I would use that in a sermon. I like that feedback. Okay, so this is 6. This is 4. 3, 2, 1.
I checked the PDF one.
Huh?
I checked the PDF.
The PDF?
Yeah.
Oh, the PDF is for the final exam.
Oh,
Or did I send a different one to you? Yeah, but pre and post condition is in the scope. So I should go over one question like that. I just cannot remember which one I sent. A PDF?
yeah. PDF file.
You said pre and post conditions a while ago.
Yeah.
3 of them.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. But I remember exam 2 of that year had a pre and post,
FX. This last
or the final exam.
Will that be on the final,
Hmm?
the pre and post condition?
Yes. Yes, pre and post condition is in the final exam. Huh? Oh. Yep, okay.
the last one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, did I download it? And where did it? I think it's in documents.
Question 6 on the final talks about pre and posts.
Okay. So we'll go to documents. Okay, let me re-download it because I don't remember where I put it.
Bottom left-hand corner.
10 folder, huh? Yeah, okay, that works. So I lost the original file of this final, so I had to use the scanned copy of a student's answer. So I had to, kind of cover up the name. And we can make it as wide as possible. Okay, so, and the last one is the pre and post condition. So we'll skip all of these and go straight to the pre and post condition one. We got enough time for that, so we should be good here. All right. So this is the question. Okay, it gives you a little bit of code, and it also gives you a precondition of line 1. And I want to derive the following. So, this is a PDF. I can't really make it wrap around. So I'm just going to scroll it here. So I need you to derive the following and do it step by step. Give me all the reasons why you're using forget, why you're using sub and stuff like that. So I need pre-2, post-2, pre-4, pre-5, post-5, pre-7, post-7. And there's two more, post-8 and post-9. Okay. Now, I only show you that because to make sure that when you're answering a question in an exam, make sure you read the question carefully. Okay, because I think some people in that particular exam did not answer all of those components, so they lose some points. All right, so I will open up a text editor on the side to answer the question. Just checking my mic, make sure it's still running. All right, so there we go. So pre-1 is given. Pre-1 is the only thing that is given to you. It says x plus y equals to w, and y is less than v. Okay, so don't ask me why that is the case. This is given to you as a precondition. So the next thing we can figure out, there are two things we can figure out like almost right away. The first one is pre-2, which means if I'm going to execute line 2, what do I know as a precondition? That's something I can know right away. So pre-2 is pre1 and the condition of the conditional statement. Do we have any questions about this? Does everybody understand why we preserve pre1, but we can also say, oh, but on top of that, we also know x is less than y is true. Did we have any? Yes, go ahead.
Because we've already established that pre-1 is true, so that before we can do the assignment statement
Yep.
two, pre-1 or line 1 has to be included on top of the fact that line 1 is true.
Yep, because we don't have any assignment statements between line 1 and 2. Okay, so that's easy to answer. And then pre4 is the same. Yes, go ahead.
Why is y less than b not included in pre2?
Why is y less than v?
Y is now greater than x.
Y is greater than x, which also means x is less than v. But we don't have to chain that, reasoning.
So, in other words, if we reach line 2, then part of the precondition of line 1 is no longer true.
No. Okay, so let me expand that. Okay, x plus y equals to w, and y is less than v, and x is less than y. Why is there a conflict?
Because one y is less than b and the other one y is greater than x.
And they cannot be true at the same time?
Right.
Why not?
Because there's no equals.
But there's no need to have equals. A condition is just something that is either true and false. So the question is, it is, you guys, yeah.
Why is x less than y? I'm sorry.
Why is x less than y as a part of pre2?
Yeah.
Because otherwise I wouldn't be on line 2. I would not be ready to execute line 2. So the fact that I am ready to execute line 2,
You're supposed to refer to the box of code.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so with any pre and post condition question, there's always a block of code. And the line numbers inside the parentheses refer to the line numbers of the code that you need to read first. Is that okay? All right. So pre4 is kind of the same thing. Pre1 still has to be true because there are no conditional statements when you go from line 1 to line 4 directly. But the condition has to be false. So you can say, x is less than y is not true. Is that okay? And then you just expand it and just go like, okay, we know what is pre1, x plus y equals to w, and y is less than v. That part comes from pre1 itself. And then you have the negation of this. I personally like to rewrite it as x is greater than or equal to y, instead of it is not the case that x is less than y. But if you say not x is less than y, that's correct. Okay.
So, quick question, we don't include line 3 there, right?
Line 3 is only there to separate the then branch from the else branch. So it really has no particular meaning other than that.
So the code you wrote in there is not necessary, correct?
Say that one more time.
The code that you wrote in there is not necessary to write.
The code that I write in the box.
Conditions. On line 3 on the one you're typing on.
Line 3 is just a mandatory thing for that program. That's an
No, I mean the other mouse pad though.
Yeah.
Oh, the other line 3? No, that has to be there because you have to expand and tell me what is pre2 exactly. So this is the intermediate step to get to the actual answer that I want. This is the actual answer that I want. Okay? All right, so now that we know what is pre2, let's go ahead and try to figure out post2. So how do we figure out post2? Well, pre2 and post2, only how you derive post2 from pre2 only has to do with line 2 itself. The fact that it is in the then branch of a conditional statement absolutely is irrelevant. Okay? So it's an assignment statement. Okay? If you look at line 2, it's an assignment statement. So when you deal with an assignment statement, how the post condition relate to the precondition has to do with when you look at the right-hand side of the assignment as a function of the variable on the left-hand side, is it reversible? That becomes the question, okay? So in this case, in order to figure out what it's posed to, the first thing you need to do is to say, well, let's look at function f, okay? Function f of x is the right-hand side of the assignment statement, which is x plus 1. So the question now is it reversible? Can I come up with an inverse function to undo f of x?
Yeah.
Okay, if I'm adding 1, to undo it is just to subtract 1. Okay, so I'm going to use f prime to indicate this is the inverse function of x, inverse function of f. So f of x is x minus 1, okay? And because there is an inverse, okay, I mean, the long sentence is there's an inverse function to f, use the substitution rule. So you have to explain to me why you're using the substitution rule as opposed to the forget rule, because it has to be one of those two. So now you have to say, well, then how do we relate the precondition to the postcondition? Well, it is the result of the substitution. Give me what is pre2, and I will pick out all the occurrences of x and replace every single one of those with the inverse function applied to x. That's the format, okay? If there is an inverse function, we figure out the post condition this way. So the next line is then, just copy and pasting a bunch of stuff. We figure out what is pre2, okay? So unfortunately, in the final exam, you can't really avoid copying and pasting much in this case. So this is pre2. You have to figure out all the x and replace every single one of those with x minus 1. I put x minus 1 in parentheses, just so that it is it's okay when it is even used as a part of a multiplication, so we don't have operator priority issues. All right, so now we do all the replacements. So we say x minus 1 plus y equals to w, and y is less than v because it has no mentioning of x whatsoever, and x minus 1 is less than y. Is that okay? So now we have post 2, the post condition of line 2, and it's derived from the precondition of line 2. Is that okay? The mechanism of this derivation only has to do with line 2 is an assignment statement, and whatever is on the right-hand side is reversible. Okay? Question? Nope. Okay. So now we can work on pre-4 and pre-5 and pre-7. So we look at pre-5. How do I get to line 5? Well, to get to line 5, I think the condition of line 4 has to be true. But there's something on top of that too, because in order to get to line 5, we have to get to line 4 first. So whatever is true to get to line 4 still has to be true, because I do not have yet a chance to change anything yet. Is that okay? So on top of that, the condition of line 4 also has to be true, which means y equals to 2z also has to be true. And I can apply the same reasoning to pre-7. So if I get to line 7, whatever is true on line 4 still has to be true. And on top of that, the negation of the condition of line 4 is going to be true. So in this case, I can say y is not the same as 2z. It has to be different. I cannot tell which way is different. I cannot tell whether it's less than or greater than, but I just know that they cannot equal to each other. Is that part okay? Okay. So once we know this, how do we figure out what is post 5? Well, once again, if you want to figure out what is post 5 based on pre 5, you look at line 5. Line 5 is an assignment statement, which means once you know the precondition of line 5, then the post condition is either the result of applying the substitution rule or applying the forget rule. But before we do that, yep.
We would only use forget if it was
as long as it is not reversible. Yep. So pre4 is x plus y equals to w, and y is less than v, and x is greater than or equal to y. But now we also have to stack on y equals to 2z. And then we say if f of y, let's pick another letter, g of y. If g of y is 2y, which is the right-hand side of the assignment on line 5, does it have an inverse? Can I reverse that operation? Can I reverse doubling something? Yeah, we just have it, right? So we say, y divided by 2 is the inverse. And then we use the same reasoning because there is an inverse function to g. Use the substitution rule. Okay. So now we say the post condition of line 5 is the result of applying the substitution rule on the precondition of line 5. But this time be very careful because the variable on the left-hand side is y, not x. So we are finding all the occurrences of y and replace every single one of those with g prime applied to y. So there's a lot of kind of copy and pasting here. X plus y, whoops, okay. So, one more line before we do the actual substitution. G prime of y is y divided by 2. Put that in parentheses. Now we can actually do the substitution. So we say x plus, oh, here's a y. So change that to y divided by 2. Let me just double check. Yep, okay. And here's another y. Y divided by 2 is less than v. X is greater than or equal to another y. Wait, I forgot something here. Yeah, that one equals to w. Okay, forgot about that. X is greater than y becomes x is greater than or equal to y divided by 2. And y divided by 2 is 2z. Is that okay? It really is just tedious, okay? It's just tedium. By looking at pre-5, I pick out this y, change it to y divided by 2. This y is replaced by y divided by 2. This y is replaced by y divided by 2. This y is now replaced by y divided by 2. If you want to do any further simplification and go like, oh, but that means y is 4z, okay, that's fine, okay, but it's not necessary. Okay, as long as you syntactically and mechanically do what the substitution rule needs to do, it's fine. Yep.
On the test, you have to expand. For example, you added line 18, would you have to put line 18 on the test?
No. In the test, if you go from line 17 directly to line 19, it's okay. Yep. All right, so this is pre-7, and oh, I made a mistake here. Nope, I'm good. Okay, so pre-7, once again, we just have to expand what is pre-4. So pre-4 is x plus y equals to w, and y is less than v. And now we can also claim, let me see, oh, there's one more. X is greater than or equal to y, and now y does not equal to 2z. Okay. Now we want to derive post 7. So same thing, we look at line 7 by itself and ask what kind of an assignment statement is it? K gets 5. Okay, so we use another notation here. So we have used f, g, h, i, j, k. We can use k. So we say function k applied to, which variable is that? Up. Okay, I cannot use k because the variable is k. What would be a good letter to use? B? Okay, fine. So function b applied to k is 5. Okay, that's my function. Is there a way to reverse this function? There's no way to reverse the function. In other words, knowing that b of k is 5, do I know what k I used to get to 5? There's no way you can tell because every single value of k is going to result in 5. So knowing the result of b of k is 5 doesn't give you any ability to reverse it. Okay, so now you say, has no inverse. Okay, and as a result of that, use the forget rule. So now we say the post condition of line 7 is the result of applying the forget rule on pre-7. What are we forgetting? Which variable? Huh? Everything that mentions k, okay? So you have to remember to mention that in the forget operation. And then after this, what can we claim that we may not be able to claim before? The new value of k is 5. So k equals 5 after this, right? K equals 5 after line 7. So now you expand this, okay? So forget, and then pre-7 is rather long. So in the test, if you do not expand it and just go straight to the answer, I probably will take it right as a correct answer. Okay, that's my precondition. And I say anything that mentions k, toss it away. Did we mention anything about k? Nope. So keep the entire thing, right? So it becomes just x plus y equals to w, keep it. Y is less than v, keep that. X is greater than or equal to y, keep that. Y does not equal to 2z, whoops, keep that. And on top, now we can say k does equal to 5. Kind of long. All right, so now we got a whole bunch of post conditions done. We got post 2 done, we got post 5 done, we got post 7 done. The first post condition of conditional statement that we can conclude first is post 8. So when line 8 is done, line 8, because I was looking at the text kind of at an angle, so it looks like 7, but it's actually line 8. So what is post 8? Yep.
Post 5 or post 7.
Yep, post 5 or post 7. So in this particular example, it is really long, so so when you're actually writing it, that can take a little bit of time. But if you get to post 8 equals to post 5 or post 7, I would definitely give partial credit for that. And then post 7 itself, it's also a little bit long. So in the test, if you do not expand it, if you're running out of time, at least get to this part. This is where most of the points are. Just being able to copy and paste it, it's giving you some points in addition, but not a whole lot. All right, so now that we know what is post 8, what is the last one that we have to figure out? Post 9, okay. Post 9 is what? If we just want to relate post 9 to some other post conditions without expanding all the details, what is that? It's post 2 or post 8, exactly. So when you're dealing with a conditional statement, the post condition of the conditional statement itself is the or the disjunction of the post condition of each branch of the conditional statement. Because by the time you get to the end of the conditional statement, you don't know which branch you came from. So you can only say, well, if I came from this branch, this condition is going to be true. If I came from this branch of the conditional statement, this condition is going to be true. But since I don't know which branch I took, I would just say that, well, this or that. Now remember, it's not either, because if you say either, it becomes exclusive or, which is not true in this case. So it's just a regular or. So in this case, it does get a little bit monstrous because we have this or Okay, when you see me doing something like this, like putting the open parenthesis on one line and then the close on the other line, it means it's going to be nasty. So the post condition of line 2 is not too bad. We got it figured out earlier, which is this part. And then post 8 is a little bit nastier. Yep. When I have to use indentation on expressions, that means it gets a little bit long. But where do you think most of the points are allocated? Okay, I'll point out where most of the points are allocated, just so that when you run out of time, you know what you need to tackle. Uh-oh. Ah, no. My touch point is going a little bit wonky. That's okay. I'll just switch to the text mode, back to the graphics mode, and see if it. Nope, the problem has not cured itself.
Mouse?
Sorry?
I have a mouse you can plug in if you need it.
I have a touchpad too, but I have disabled the touchpad. Let me think. I don't want to turn off the whole thing because then the recorder is going to be off too. Well, okay, I think I know how to do this. Use the keyboard only. Okay, where's my text? Yep, there we go. Okay. So I just have to avoid using the pointing device. I can do that for a while. Okay, so let me get back to what I was about to talk about, which is where are the points? This carries addition. This line here is important because it relates the condition of the precondition of the conditional statement to the precondition of the then branch. So this is important. This part here is also important. You look at the right-hand side of an assignment statement. If it is reversible, then you have to use the substitution rule. And then you also have to tell me how do we apply the substitution rule. What are we substituting and what are we substituting with? Okay, so these lines are important. This is important again. This is the else branch. So this tells us what is the precondition of the entire else branch of a conditional statement. So it is important. Okay, this is the same thing as before. Why are we using a substitution rule? It's because the right-hand side of an assignment is reversible. This is important again. This is the condition, the precondition of the then branch of a conditional statement. This is important because it tells us if the right-hand side of an assignment statement is not reversible, we have to use the forget rule. Okay. Now the result of applying the forget rule is actually important, but in this case, because K was not mentioned anywhere within the precondition, so the forget operation actually has nothing to forget. We get to keep the entire precondition. When you specify the when you apply the forget rule, this part is also very important. Okay, you cannot just forget something, because you're also adding something in that kind of assignment statement, because there's something new that we can assert after the assignment statement. At the end of a conditional statement, this is the end of the nested conditional statement. This is important. How do we take the post condition of one branch, take the post condition of the other branch, and make the post condition of the entire conditional statement? That is important. It's a concept issue. Okay? And of course, the next one is kind of the same thing, except this is the outer conditional statement. So in the case of a nested conditional statement, if someone gives me, just some post condition is some post condition or some other post condition, but the line numbers are wrong, that person will not get a whole lot of points. So it has to be reflecting the structure of the code. Does everybody understand what I mean when I said it has to reflect the structure of the code? Okay. So I'm telling you all of this just so that you can prioritize. When you run out of time, okay, what do you write down to get the most amount of partial credit without using a whole lot of time? Is that okay? All right. So one thing I think I can also make sure that you can assume is all questions are going to carry the same weight again. So that means, you just kind of quick scan, through all the questions, find out which one seemed the easiest to you, start with that one. When you're done with that one, find the next easiest question to start, and also remember to time yourself. Okay, just because a question seemed to be easy, if you get stuck and your timer is up, move on. Okay, don't get stuck with a question and keep, working on that question, because the next question, even though it didn't seem to be easy, but it might be actually fairly easy. So you don't want to lose time working on something and then lose time with all the rest of the questions. So always time yourself. If I give you 6 questions, you have 2 hours, which is 120 minutes. So 120 divided by 6 is 20. So you basically say, on the average, I have 20 minutes per question. But don't set it to 20 minutes because that won't give you any extra time to get back to an earlier question. So I personally would set it to 15 minutes per question. So this way, when the timer goes off and I'm done with all 6 questions, even though some of those are partially done, I always have time to go back to continue with at least one of the questions to try to get more points. Is that okay? Yep.
So on line 24, I should have mentioned this earlier, but on line 24, there's y isn't equal to 2z,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have comma k.
Yeah.
Why is that there?
The comma k comes from this comma k. Because comma k tells me what variable am I trying to forget. Or to be more precisely, conditions involving which variable should be forgotten.
So that just goes at the end of the entire...
Right, so it is, between those lines, this gets expanded to this. So the actual operation is to take the precondition and then just expand it based on what it is. And that's why the comma 7 is always there, because I'm not done with the forget operation yet. I'm just specifying what is the actual precondition that I'm applying the forget operation to.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So on Monday, that's our last lecture. So I would suggest, if you have time over the weekend, try to study over the weekend on all of the material from pre and post condition to the last topic that we have talked about. Okay? If you have any questions, over the weekend, bring those questions on Monday, or you can still ask questions over the weekend, but Monday is the session where I will help you answer any questions regarding the material. So you go ahead first and then you. Yep. Huh? When was the final? When is it going to be? Wednesday? Yep. Yep. Okay. So it's Wednesday, same time as the lecture itself, but the time is only 2 hours. So we're going to go from 6 to 8. Okay? And you have a question. Yep.
So you're saying that like 6 questions like this?
Yeah, maybe 6-ish. I haven't decided yet. Yep.
I just think like we just did 6 questions, right? The 5.
We did 6 questions, including this one.
So you moved really quick. And it took you 2 hours to do it.
Well, yeah, but he also had 6 questions, and then just later.
And I drank coffee, crack a few jokes. Yeah.
They're going to take a little more time to do
Okay.
It moves pretty quick.
Not exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
We have two homework assignments, those will be graded.
They'll be graded. I will try to get those graded before the final exam. But they will all just be added up, yeah, in the end. Oh, okay. If you have a specific question about what you turn in, I can answer that question too. Yep. Okay. All right. All right. Well, you guys have a nice weekend.
So, I'm not complaining. This is just one class that I really tried really hard. I know I'm doing really good. I just want to do really good on the final. So
Okay.
that's
No, that's fine. I understand the concern. I mean,
just trying to say, like, we're going to think slower than you can. So just kind of,
okay.
I would factor that in.
Yep.
We're still learning. It's going to take us a little while. If we get stuck, we need to push it. Right? So as long as
Yep. All right. That's good.
Question about that, pre and post condition.
Uh huh.
Um,
Let me get back to that one. Uh-oh. Where is it? I might have lost that one. Darn it. Or it's moved somewhere else because, it's still streaming. I can't control the... There we go.